Okay, look, I know you're looking at the title of the video and be like, what the hell? Just listen, okay? This is not my idea, okay? A couple days ago, in the Fury Crafting community, suddenly, randomly, we just spun up a random topic, which is like, hey guys, what do you guys think is the most overrated characters by the casual player in Genshin Impact? And then from there on, we actually had some really cool and really insightful discussion. Each Fury Crafter gave out their top 5 answers and explained why. And I'm not gonna spoil those for you. If you're interested in their answers, maybe you can just ask them. However, with that being said, this video is gonna be my personal opinion of what I think is the top 5 most overrated characters in Genshin Impact. And that's why this video exists. Well, it's a free clickbait, controversial, I don't know, whatever you want. But now, on the topic of making clickbait, do you guys know that about 53% of you are actually not subscribed to the channel? So that's about half of you. And if you guys are not subscribed already, what are you waiting for? Don't forget to subscribe. And also, of course, check out my other social media like Twitch, TikTok, and my brand new clip channel. And with that being said, let's get started into what is my personal top 5 most overrated characters in Genshin Impact. Before that though, there's something I want to talk about, and that is just because a character is overrated doesn't actually mean they're bad. A characters could be like A tier characters, but the community think they're like a SSSS tier characters, then they will be overrated. But in the end of the day, they're still a really good characters. So again, just because a character is overrated doesn't necessarily mean they're automatically bad. So that's something to keep in mind. In fact, while the title of the video and the premise of the video is top 5 most overrated characters in Genshin Impact, it is probably more appropriate to title it 5 character that I think is overrated in Genshin Impact. By no means is this 5 character is going to be in any specific order, but with that being said, here are 5 characters that are overrated that I think in Genshin Impact. Starting off with the video, we have Yelan, who, by the way, is a really strong character. In fact, Yelan is one of the perfect example of a character being overrated doesn't necessarily mean they're bad. So why is she overrated? And that is mostly because the comparison between Yelan and Xingqiu. The truth is that people just refuse to accept, despite like pretty much every free crafter say so, is that Xingqiu, it's arguably better than Yelan. Strictly speaking, Yelan is actually a downgrade compared to Xingqiu for the most part. Not even a side grade, a strict downgrade. That is because Xingqiu just have way better utility and way better hydro application. But on top of that, in terms of overall team rotation damage, for the most part, Xingqiu actually also win out there. So Xingqiu just pretty much win out every single category. And yes, that's including Yelan's A4 talent on certain on-field characters. Although for a character like Yoimiya, she is better off with Yelan. For majority of the meta team in Genshin Impact, Xingqiu is just strictly better than Yelan for the most part, if not equal. Now, of course, just to make it a little bit more clear, we're talking about a C6 Xingqiu, which is a C0 Yelan, both without a 5-star weapon. Of course, if you have something like Aqua, then Yelan could win, or like High Constellation. So for the most part, Whale gamer might prefer Yelan over Xingqiu. But if you are just a regular gamer and you have a C6 Xingqiu, for the most part, he just really do more because his Constellation are just so well and they scale so strong, especially one like C2 where it reduces opponent hydro resistance by 15%, as well as C4 where it gives you 1.5 times true damage on your elemental skills. One of the biggest common mistake that people make is probably looking at her A4 and thinking that it gives you a flat 50% damage buff, when in reality that's not true at all, because this is a ramping bonus damage buff where it starts you off with 1% and slowly ramp you to 50%. It is not a flat 50% damage buff. So people will often dramatically overestimate the amount of damage you get from her A4 talent. While it does give you a good amount of increase, it is probably not as much as most people think, especially compared to the fact that Yelan just have higher energy recharge requirement. So in overall, Yelan just kind of lose out in a lot of different categories compared to Xingqiu. Once again, Yelan is a really good character. It's probably one of the best 5-star role in the game right now, and one of the strongest 5-star characters in the entire game, thanks to being able to draft teams like double hydro or just kind of work as a hydro enabler. But strictly speaking, she's not stronger than Xingqiu, which is what most people rate her to be, and that's why she's overrated. This is especially true with the new release of Danjo in Genshin Impact 3.0, where every single team that prefer a off-field hydro characters would pretty much strictly prefer Xingqiu over Yelan, and so that's pretty much the thing. Moving on, we actually have Ganyu, which is also a character that I think is overrated by a lot of people, mostly in the damage category. Now, don't get me wrong, again, I still think Ganyu is a pretty solid and pretty good character, but not because of her damage, and especially not because of her charge attack damage, which is what the most common misconception is. A lot of people like to think that Ganyu is really strong because her charge attack can do a lot of damage, like 100,000 or 200,000, when in reality, that's like a showcase DPS per screenshot damage. For the most part, most most players that are not whales are not actually going to get that kind of damage. And most importantly, Ganyu's power budget is not even in her charge attack to begin with, which is why they're wrong. Ganyu's most dominant team, which is Freeze team, actually care a lot more about her elemental burst, and her elemental burst is actually where it contributes majority of the output in a Freeze team, especially in AoE content, which is where the team shine. When it comes down to a 15-second rotation version of the Ganyu Freeze team, you can actually get away with not casting a single charge attack at all, and maybe you can at most cast 1 or 2 charge attack depending on how fast you are, or if you cancel the rotation a little bit. Thinking Ganyu is strong because her charge attack do a lot of damage is completely the wrong way to look at it, and why she is overrated by a lot of people. The real value in Ganyu is not her damage, but rather her versatility, being able to bring her to a lot of different content in the game. You know, imagine there is a flying enemy in the abyss that just stall forever and it's really hard to hit because they're in the air all the time. Well, Ganyu doesn't have that problem because she can just shoot it down. And likewise, in the brand new abyss, there is another different flying enemy. It's the elemental rune drake who can fly in the air, and while you can shoot them down by using a bow characters by hitting the weak spot, you can alternatively just keep hitting them while she is in the air by using Ganyu. Moving on, we have one that a lot of people are probably not too surprised about, and this is a pretty common pick by a lot of people, which is Yulan. For the most part though, I think people misunderstand Yulan a little bit, which is her damage output on a grand scheme of things is actually fine. For the most part, she's able to output competitive damage to other mid-tier team like Ito or Ayato. Definitely not anything close to the top tier team, which a lot of people always think about, which is like, oh, people see her elemental burst able to do 200 or 400,000 damage and think that she just does way more damage than any other characters. When you consider a overall team damage level and a team damage rotation level, she just output kind of mediocre damage relative to the other meta team. One of the biggest problem when it comes to Eula team is just that she just doesn't really have any good teammate. Unable to utilize Anemo characters or Hydro characters efficiently is definitely one of the more poor choice when it comes to Genshin Impact, as these two elements just have really ridiculously strong characters from Sucrose to Kazu or Xingqiu to Yelan. And while Raiden is a really strong character that make up a really good Eula team, the problem with putting Raiden into Eula team is that it is a waste of Raiden. Raiden is just better off to be used somewhere else most of the time with either her own team like in Rational team or Raiden Hyper, and so putting Eula together with Raiden is actually a downgrade for Raiden. Although if you just want to play Eula, it is still one of her stronger options. It's just a little inefficient when it comes to utilizing Raiden, and to be honest, not that preferred it when it comes to strictly talking about the meta. However, of course, the biggest problem with Yola is actually her gameplay itself. She has a few whole or gameplay problem when it comes to her actual character's gameplay, such as being backloaded with her elemental burst, not critting on your elemental burst energy problem, not having good teammate, and etc. You guys probably know it by now. Again, her overall damage output is actually fine. It's okay. It's like relatively in line with other mid-tier team like Mono Geo, but you just spend so much more effort doing it. So it's a result you're basically playing a high effort, low return characters when you could be playing something else like a low effort, good return characters. To be honest, even like Ito is so much more Unga Bunga than Eula, and it just doesn't really make that much sense to play a high effort, low return characters when you can just play a more like a low effort characters to begin with. And so Eula is just not really favorable when it comes to the meta, and most people probably overrate her in one way or the other. I'm looking at you, damage per screenshot user. Moving on to the next one, we have Zhongli, which is another familiar face. Dramatically overrated in my opinion by a lot of mostly casual players who think he is absolutely a must pull. You have to have it in his account. He should be the first character you pull because he makes you quote unquote not die. When in reality, for the most part, Free Crafter doesn't really value him that high since he lacked the damage utility category. Now, to be fair, most people in the more meta style thing probably underrate him a little bit differently, as in, to be honest, his 20% universal shred, as well as being able to ping pressure, as well as conveniently being your defensive option, is, to be honest, could be quite valuable. But regardless, he's definitely not some kind of must pull, save your game kind of characters, and so in that sense, he's kind of overrated. I don't want to dive too deep into Zhongli again. I feel like we talked about this character enough already, even with a completely dedicated video to this aspect of the topic, but let me just quickly summarize it a little bit again. The reason why Zhongli is overrated is simply because a lack of fundamental understanding when it comes to video game, as Genshin Impact might be a lot of people's first video game, and so we end up getting a lot of inexperienced video gamer. Now that might be a little bit over dramatic, but it is actually the truth. Most new people often confuse not losing with the same thing as winning, as in a path to not lose is the same as winning, because if you're not losing, then you have to be winning, right, by the process of elimination. But actually is not true. Not losing is not the same thing as approaching yourself toward a win condition, and there's a dramatical difference between these two aspects, and it's very important to distinguish them if you want to be an experienced video gamer. In this case, Zhongli is a not lose character, but he's not a win condition character either. Sure, if Genshin Impact didn't have a timer, then Zhongli could be a part of the win condition. Your win condition in that case would be to stall long enough so that the enemy eventually gets chipped away to 0 HP, but that doesn't work in Genshin Impact due to the endgame Spiral Abyss having a timer on how fast you have to DPS the boss. In that case, your win condition will always be doing enough damage so that you can complete the timer with no exception, and Zhongli just doesn't fall into that win condition category, and so he's a lot loose characters. He's more of a luxury character that you can utilize when you already fulfill your win condition, but he's not a character that directly fulfill your win condition. And this is the part where many people will argue that Zhongli certainly contribute to some amount of damage, especially the fact that he make you not dodge, mean that you don't have to waste time dodging and therefore lose DPS. To be honest, most of the meta characters in Genshin Impact doesn't really get hindered from dodging that much anymore. We're looking at characters like Raiden, who has infinite resistance, so you don't get interrupted by enemy attack. Hu Tao together with Xingqiu's both have a good amount of interrupt resistance, and when you're playing Hu Tao together with Xingqiu's, you can't really get interrupted that often, and therefore you don't really lose DPS that much. Other characters like Xiangling just have a power needle that continuously spin no matter what, and so even when you are getting hit by the enemy, or even when you're dodging, your power needle will continuously do damage, and that's one of the reasons why she is so good, because she doesn't care what you're doing. You always do damage on Xiangling. And yeah, while some characters get hindered a lot by not having a shield like Yomi or Xiao because they really care to not get interrupted, that's more like a problem within the characters itself, and having a solution to a problem doesn't necessarily make it good, but rather you should just think about how to not have that problem in the first place. Before moving to the final last characters, let's talk about some honorable mention. This last characters, to be honest, I was debating if it should even be on the list at all, because you can definitely argue that this character is not necessarily overrated, but I end up deciding to put that characters onto the list anyway. In terms of honorable mention, we have character like Raiden. The reason is because her damage is most of the time not as high as most people think. The real biggest benefit when it comes down to Raiden Shogun is that she's very easy to play. You don't have to do energy funneling, you don't have to do complicated rotation, you can just hit the enemy, and the results, she's just so easy to unleash her potential. But when it comes down to actually the cap of the team, Raiden Shogun's potential level is actually not anywhere higher than other top tier meta team, if it's even higher at all. But again, just because a character is overrated doesn't make them a bad character. Raiden is still a really good character, really easy to play, which is her biggest selling point. Just she's not the absolute monstrosity, destroy everything that you might think off, unless you have a whaled Raiden, I guess, which is apparently what a lot of people have nowadays. The next character is Hu Tao. While she can do really strong single target damage, single target is technically not as valuable as multi AoE target, as single target damage is easier to get. Plus, there are a lot of good teams that do really good single target damage like now, especially ones like Double Hydro. Now, fortunately, you can run Hu Tao together with Double Hydro to get a really strong team, but you also don't have to. Hu Tao is a really strong single target damage dealer, but not a monstrosity single target damage dealer, and that's why she's a little overrated maybe. Finally, we have Kujo-Sara. As a electro attack buffer, the amount of buff that she gives is actually not that high and not as good as most people think, especially if you don't have Constellation 6. For the most part, a Lisa carrying a TTDS can actually often output the same if not higher buffing potential than Sara, and if you do have a CJ Sara, then in some cases Kujo-Sara does outperform Lisa. But the buff that Lisa can give, for the most part, can rival Kujo-Sara, and so Kujo-Sara is not some kind of super amazing buffer. I don't know if people think so, but this was one of the other popular opinion that people might have. So the final character that I think is often overrated by the community, Sangonomiya Kokomi. When Sangonomiya first came out, there was a lot of controversy around her about how she might be one of the worst characters in the game, or one of the most terrible characters in the game. And over time, people figured out that she's actually good characters. And I kind of think what happened is that in return, people overcorrected. People went from thinking she's a bad character to, oh, she's actually one of the strongest characters in the game. When, to be honest, in reality, I think she's just okay, more like a fine character. For the most part nowadays, at least before Danjo come out, Kokomi was mostly being played in free team primarily and sometimes in Taser team. And to be honest, in those teams, she's not really necessarily stronger than any other option. What she does do is bring you extra comfort through the healing, but in terms of streaking of damage potential, she's not necessarily stronger than other option. One of the most common misconceptions I think that people would say is, oh, Kokomi has better hydro application than Mona in the free team, therefore she must also result in doing higher damage with the team, right? And that's actually not true. For the most part, Mona and Kokomi have pretty much similar output, if not like a little differs, and it's not really the biggest selling point of Kokomi over Mona. And the only thing that actually differs between Kokomi and Mona is just the comfort that Kokomi can bring over Mona, thanks to the fact that she is healing, and maybe with the extra hydro application it helps you freeze a little longer and therefore get more comfort there as well. And it's interesting because people are starting to think Kokomi is a must-pull character now, being like just next to Zhongli, who's the quote-unquote other must-pull that they always think of, when in reality I think that's not true at all. I think just like Zhongli, they are fine characters to pull for if you do know what you're looking for and you do know what you're doing, but shouldn't be a huge priority when it comes down to pulling. And I can definitely recommend some other character to first pull for before Kokomi, especially since, to be very honest, I think Kokomi is a rather expensive luxury character compared to Mona if you do already own her or other hydro characters. I think the extra benefit of having healing are often not really worth the hefty price of Genshin Impact Throw Despair 5-star pull rate, but if you do really want to pull for Kokomi, I guess it's fine. Other than that though, for the most part, again, I think Kokomi is a fine, pretty decent character. And again, she did gain some cool potential with the Danjo team as well. And that's why I said I was hesitant if I wanted to put Kokomi on this list or not, especially compared to another character like Raiden Shogun. However, in the end, I chose to go with Kokomi. But for the most part, I think Kokomi is alright. With that being said though, that is pretty much my 5 character that I think is overrated in Genshin Impact. I don't really know if it's top 5 since I don't actually know if Kokomi belong to that top 5 or not. So again, the characters are more just like 5 characters that are overrated by the community in Genshin Impact, in my personal opinion. A little cool, fun discussion video kind of expressing my opinion. I say that, but there are probably going to be a lot of controversial comment in down below. So with that being said, again, as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. And I don't know, let me know what you guys want me to talk about, I guess.